welcome to Downward Dogma, a podcast that explores and challenges today's authority system. Join us as we discuss the ingredients and functionality of our current framework and explore some possible solutions. Prepare to have your awareness of today's political terrain expanded. And now, your hostesses, Jennie and Sarah.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Downward Dogma. You're here with Jennie and Sarah, and we're going to be talking about the current unrest and the Age of Aquarius. How you doing, Sarah?
Good. I'm going to apologize in advance to our listeners. I am camping from yesterday until Friday with my sister and all of our kids, and I found Wi-Fi finally in kind of a little lodge, but it's busy. Than I thought.
So if we hear background, you're in a lodge. Good to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's fun for camping in the family, getting outside, and the weather's good?
No. Well, it is right at this very moment, but it has been raining since we got here. So we set up camp in the rain. It had rained all night. It was super windy, and it's just my sister and I and our 3 kids. And so it's like usually I have big dogs, and I've got my husband there, and we're out in the middle of nowhere. And so, you know, not the best night's sleep.
Not the best night's sleep. Did you hear noises all night?
All night. Every little noise, I'm like, is that the zipper? Is someone coming into the tent? And I'm not even one to like be super scared or like paranoid about things, but for some reason, you know, put me alone in the middle of a campsite, and I've suddenly become, you know, the person with all the theories.
Like you said, everything's a zipper. Someone's coming in. Any little twig breaking, that's a zipper. You know,
exactly.
It's so amazing how strong our minds are. I've read a funny meme on Facebook that was like, feeling lonely? Put a scary movie on. You won't be alone after a while. There'll be ghosts in there. Every little sound is the devil coming. It's so funny. It's funny how our minds work. But, you know, just that extra comfort of some dogs even. You know, if it's something serious, that dog's going to let you know. So it's good to have them around.
Totally. And I didn't bring the dogs because it's hot, and the one that's probably the most friendly around strangers is like got 2 coats, like he's a German Shepherd mix, and he's 13 years old, so he doesn't do well with the heat, and so I just didn't. Now I'm kind of wishing I had.
But like it's okay if he's uncomfortable and a little bit warm, as long as I'm not freaked out the whole time. No ITs. You could have sprayed him down with some water bottles or something.
Exactly. And he's a dog, right? I mean, here I am like worried about his internal temperature. I'm like, wait a second. The dogs were like supposed to be outside.
Mm-hmm. My ex-husband and I had a Rottweiler, another German dog, and he did not like the heat either. You'd find him in the cool tiles laying on it because he's so big and had so much hair, but he didn't mind it too much. You just had to keep him out of the straight sun, right, into the shade or something.
And we're right on the lake, so like he could have just jumped in the water and been fine. But anyway, here we are. Totally.
So, how should we start off? Do you want to start us off with the Age of Aquarius? I know a little bit from my co-host Sybil Starr talking about it, but I want to hear your take.
Yeah, so I'm super new to all of this too, but it kind of popped into my head when you had asked what the topic should be, and we took a break. We didn't record last week because this is a Tuesday podcast, and we were honoring Blackout Tuesday, and I didn't want to not address kind of the social unrest that we are all kind of experiencing in this time. And I have been reading this book, and I'm always reading a new book. I probably say that every single episode. I'm like, I'm reading this book, and I got to talk about it. But this one's called, a Goddess. It'll come to me, but it's Goddess Evolution, I think. And it really talks about the mythology of goddesses and you know, the history of them, but also kind of how they apply to today and how we see them show up even in things like Disney characters. And she talks about the Age of Aquarius, which I think we used to be in the Piscean age up until about what they expect is like 2012, which is kind of what the spiritual realm talks about, as like we shifted dimensions in 2012. And she doesn't speak about that, but she does speak about the fact that the Aquarian age is one that like even the Aztecs and the Mayans predicted, like, Nostradamus, like anyone who has, been projecting into the future, like they talk about this current age of Aquarius. They call it different things. But basically it's like a balancing and, where equality becomes the main focus. And that doesn't just happen peacefully and overnight, right? Like there has to be unrest. There has to be, making people uncomfortable in order to break down constructs and programs that people have for, hundreds of thousands of years just kind of accepted as, the way of life. And so it's painful and it's yucky and it doesn't come easy, but it's like all part of the plan. And also, she speaks to the fact that like, that's why we're here. Like we were here to do this work in the age of the Aquarius.
I love that. It's very exciting. And I did just a touch of reading while I was driving home from getting my car work done. I barely made it into the house to do the show. I'm glad I did. But I was reading, and it was saying things like, I wasn't reading, Siri was telling me while I was driving, but it was saying things like, we're not sure if we're out of Pisces or into Aquarius. And I like that your take is 2012 because I'm an energy reader for my day job. And in 2012, I got knocked on my ass. The energy shift was so intense. And I was talking to my teacher about it, who's a trance channel, and he goes, this isn't the last one. If you can believe it, it's going to become more intense. And I was like, mother of God. And then here we are 8 years later, up into our eyeballs in change and chaos. And here we are. It's very interesting and fun to think about being here at this exact time. There's so many times we could have peppered in and been a part of this existence, and we probably were, and other time frame continuous, but it's so, I'll call it a coincidence, but I don't really necessarily think it is. I think it's strategy, but it's such a coincidence that me and all my friends who are intense spiritual teachers, leaders, and I guess business people are here right now wanting to fight this fight. And I call it a fight, although it's the opposite of fight. I feel like it's a transformation and an alchemic kind of experience, but it feels like a push, and it's going to. And if I keep hearing it in all my sessions, Jennie, I'm having a hard time with not knowing what's going to happen. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's going to be a tricky one. And I'll repeat what my teacher says, it's going to become more intense, not more than we can handle, but this is the beginning stages, and we are on a marathon of thing after thing, event after event happening to make the changes we want to see. I think most of us do. People say, oh, no one wants change. I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of us who do. There's probably plenty who don't, but I know for sure there's a lot of us who do.
I think you're right. I think a lot of us have been for a long time waiting for this change, like asking for this change, like literally telling the universe, like, we want these things. However, on that other flip side, we're humans and we like predictability. We like comfortability. We like knowing, what's going to happen. And that's why we create programming to begin with, because it's predictable and you know how to behave and function within it. We know, stock markets will do their thing. We know, we thrive in environments that we know how to react. We know how to be who we're supposed to be within them. Like, what part do we play? And we're kind of in a popcorn popper at the moment. And, we're just all these little kernels that have been waiting to become, pieces of popcorn. And the process is chaotic and hot and not all that pleasurable for people. And, nobody knows what it's going to be like to be a piece of popcorn. We're all just like little kernels. And so it's kind of scary. And I think it's awesome, right? The popcorn's way better than the kernel.
For sure.
But, the process of getting there is hard. And some people are terrified that if everyone becomes a popcorn, there's not going to be enough room for their popcorn. I don't know. It's almost as though there's we've talked about it, I guess, a few times now, but there's this sense of scarcity, and that if everyone is equal, then there won't be enough to go around, which, obviously there will be. we create the universe, and the universe is endless. But there's just this programming that creates a lot of fear when large scale change happens, and that when you're operating from a place of fear, you get anger, you get violence, you get all sorts of awful, reactions. But at the same time, like when you look at the riots, they've tried everything else. It's like they've tried kneeling, they've tried, peaceful protesting, and I don't believe that the negative side of the riots is all the people who are, looking to make change and fighting for equality. I think there are people who truly want to create chaos because certain people, certain business entities thrive in chaos, and agendas can be better had in chaos. But all of it is a part of like a global awakening, which is really, really exciting.
Sybil, the astrologer on one of our other shows on this network, we are the Third Eye Political Radio Network, and of course this is Downward Dogma. My other show is called Political Star Talk, and Sybil Starr was talking about, this is a different language for me because I don't know a lot about astrology this lifetime, but she said Pluto, the planet of death, is conjunct, I'm not exactly sure what that means, with Saturn, the planet of karma, and Jupiter, the planet of expansion. And basically what she said about that was, we are coming into the end of constructs that we've known. We are about to flip it all over. It's going to be chaotic and crazy, but this is our karma, Saturn, and we want to expand, Jupiter. And then, of course, you got Pluto just coming in, knocking it all down like the death card in a tarot deck. I'm like, ooh, shit. I mean, it is like written in the stars. It's almost as intense as like the three wise men coming to find Jesus in the manger because the stars told them to. I'm like, I feel like we're being shown a lot through the stars. I love astrology. I find it to be a tool. I don't only lean into astrology. I find that to be dogmatic when you lean into only one modality of any kind.
Of course.
But this is intense. When I'm hearing these big stories and these big theories and such, it's different than hearing your horoscope for the day. Horoscopes for the day can be generalized and cool, and it's fun to read them and what have you, but this depth of astrology is intense. I suggest everyone go to Sybil Starr's Facebook page. She's got videos about all this. It's free. I got a session from her. You'll like it. I've been selling astrology more than ever. And listen to this, Sarah. So this is something to throw up in the air for you to look at, and you can play ball with it any way you like. Things are lining up pretty magically, speaking of the stars and how everything's laying down. Myself and Mandy and Leah, who I do a show with, it's called The Witching Hour, and we do guided meditations and past life regressions and what have you on our show every Friday on our sister network, Heart Over Ego Radio. Anyway, Leah's friends outside of Atlanta are going to be recording us. We're going to do a professional recording and try to sell it to Hay House and places like that.
Awesome.
I feel like I'm a rock star. I'm like going to record. Yeah, I'm going to get a drink after. Anyone ready to hang? I just feel like a rock star when I say I'm going to record. I don't know. It's funny.
Yeah.
Even though we're doing the opposite of rock, it's guided meditation. But either way, I feel like a rock star. It's this day and age rock star. Rock star in the age of Aquarius is the meditators and the spiritual people. Any which way, I want you to get involved with this if you want to. This is just falling into place. Over Halloween is going to be a full moon, and we're going to be having our recording going on out in Marietta, and we're going to go north to Woodstock, Georgia. It's all fun and games when you have places like Woodstock and named
Amazing.
Woodstock, and we're going to do a retreat. We're going to make Organite. So our friend Jessie May is going to come with Mandy down from the northeast there, and we're going to do Organite the first night, and then the next day, which is Halloween, we're going to do a full-on cacao full moon ceremony. I'm bringing in my comedian friend from Atlanta, and a good friend of mine. His name is Saint Seven Is, and I've known him for years, and I always used to tell him, I'm like, you're MLK and reincarnate, and he laughs at me because we both know that might not be true, but it's fun to think about because he's got that energy, and he's going to come do some talking. So we're going to round it up with like the Black Panther energy as well as a comedian who is a lot like George Carlin. So if anyone's interested in some alternative excitement, go ahead and find me on Facebook, Jenny McDaniel. You can email me at heartoverego@gmail.com if you're interested in playing ball. We're going to call it the Witchin' Weekend.
I love that.
You should come down.
Oh my gosh, I'm definitely. I was supposed to go to the Hex Fest in New Orleans in August, but they've, of course, canceled it. They're going to do it, I think, online, which is, great. I'll get to be able to see the content. But there's something about being with people that was really exciting. So I'm super excited. I've never done a moon ritual, which is on my bucket list. So this is perfect.
And Leah, our friend, and she'll be doing the ceremony part. Mandy and I will be handling food and beverage and, of course, doing some teachings, too. And our friend Jessie will be doing the orgonite. I'm not sure if you know what orgonite is, but it's a very helpful tool to help fight off 5G and any, I guess they call them EMF radiation-type frequencies. It is, don't quote me on this, but I think it's silicone. So it's a clear liquid that gets put in molds, but before the liquid gets put in, crystals and little pieces of metal that have been Reiki'd and energized are all put into this conglomerate. I'll show you a picture and even add it to our show page. Our friend Jessie May makes organites. I've been buying them for years, and I even asked my teacher how helpful they were with helping with 5G and 4G and what have you, and he goes, excellent. You should use those. It won't help you 100%. It's not like foolproof, but it is a tool that you can use to help fight these EMFs, I think they call them. Anyway, it's going to be a pretty fun weekend, and the ceremony will take place on the full moon, and during the day we'll do like cacao and then just kind of some basic ceremonies. Leah will be doing it. She's in Chattanooga. She's been doing it for years. She's been trained in it. She's very, very good at it. Goes to Costa Rica, gets real cacao, shit like that. So it's just going to be ridiculous. And then when the lights go down, the moon comes up, I guess we'll probably turn into wild animals. No, I kid. I don't know what we'll do.
I love it.
It's all business during the day and party at night. And then, of course, the next day, we're going to have like a brunch and everyone can pick up their organite and stuff. So that's something that's in the works, Witchin' Weekend in Woodstock, Georgia. So funny, my spirit guide said, why don't you reach out to Seven? That's who I was talking about, who we always tease about him being Martin Luther King or Malcolm X and reincarnate. They were like, reach out to him. And I reached out to him, and I hadn't messaged him for 8 years. And the last message I wrote to him was me channeling and saying, I don't know what's going to happen. I know we're going to have an event, and Woodstock comes to mind, and chaos comes to mind. What? And that's what I wrote to him, and I almost pissed my pants. I mean, I'm a professional psychic. This shit doesn't really surprise me very much anymore, but that one really did, considering the length of time that it held space. So 2012
like, hey.
When I wrote him.
Yeah. And you're like, hey, remember that last message I just wrote up here? Just following up on that. I have a few more details.
That's exactly what I did. I swear. I'll send you the message so you can see that. I have a few more things to go with that revolution. And he's like, let me know what's going down. And I'm like, all right, let's play ball, hardcore. So it's all lining up. And about a month ago, I think I even told you and Tasha, I'm like, ooh, let's do another Woodstock. We need a party. We need some sort of coming together like that. So we'll start in Georgia, Woodstock, and then we'll grow. We'll get big in New York after that or something, I tease. But it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to be doing some readings and some healings and all kinds of stuff. So everyone get a hold of me. We'll find you a place. I know there's only going to be limited seating because it's our first one, and we didn't know how big we'd go, and we kind of had to keep things. And this is where we can become flexible, where we have these plans to do this. And if the world does something different, like Corona comes back with a vengeance, or the earth cracks in half, well, we can call Airbnb and cancel that. So we're kind of doing this lightly. So we know there's all kinds of shifts and changes, not tons of attachments, not going to start kicking the wall if we have to reschedule till spring, but just laying down the tracks lightly and seeing what pops up. So that's kind of how we're doing it. And that's kind of how I'm doing my life, kind of just planning and seeing what happens and not having too much attachment, which I think is probably the way to go.
Absolutely. I mean, when I hosted my first mobile bar conference this February, we kind of just threw it up and we're like, if 50 people come, it'll be great. So the venue that we had was somewhat small, and we sold like 50 tickets in 3 days. And we're like, oh, shoot. Okay, so this is actually going to be a thing. How many can we get in this venue? And we ended up with like 150 people, and it was super, super tight. But people understood, like, this is our first year. We're just trying to, we capped it at 125, but then, people have like spouses and like whatnot. And we had presenters and all that stuff. So we're like, next year we'll find a different venue for sure. But thanks for understanding that we just kind of went with the flow this time.
Yep. Start small and let it grow. I think I've been in business a long time, and I've seen a lot of people go down because they start real, real big and in a lot of debt, and then they can't get the leg up or whatever. I always, because I don't have a lot of money backing me throughout my life, I've always just started small and grown into it. And then I was able to manage my business as opposed to having it too big, too quick. That can get overwhelming. Mm-hmm.
Totally. I think you're right. A lot of people fail when they either spend all the money before they actually have concept tested, or they do the opposite and they grow too fast without, building the systems that they need for scalability.
Business, it's not for the faint of heart.
No, definitely. You've got to come in with one. You really have to like to fail. If you're gonna be an entrepreneur and any good at it, you just have to get real comfortable with doing things wrong. Yep,
and letting your ego take a back seat so that you can continue moving forward, because the ego wants to get flary and angry when we make mistakes, and you just got to keep putting it in the back seat and say, okay, we're growing here. Things aren't going to be perfect. It's going to look like this. And running podcast networks, I've seen over the years that some people hop on, like you do, Sarah, and they're just kind of here and we talk and what have you. And then I've had a handful of people really, really stress about it and have a ton of anxiety before they even do a show, and then they have to drop out before they can even do a show. So I think people's stresses and anxieties get in the way quite often too. Now, definitely there's other techniques of why businesses fail, but I'm pretty sure our ego does a pretty good job of stopping us quite often.
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses end before they've even started.
Yep. And that's just the first go around, and they'll get it the next time if they want it.
That's right.
A lot of people think they want to run a business, and then they run a business and say, fuck this. This is too much. And I say, I hear that all day long.
Amen.
It's not for everyone. It seems like a pivotal point, like, if you're going to keep doing a service, you might as well have a business. That's not necessarily true for everyone. It's not for everyone. And it doesn't have to be for everyone.
That's right. And it really can't be. If you're going to have businesses that scale, you need people who will work for other people. So if everyone was an entrepreneur, we'd all be back in our little, farm towns where there's a cobbler and a blacksmith.
One of each.
And, yeah, exactly.
And if you wanted something super special, you might go 2 towns over where their blacksmith's a touch better or whatever. No, that's right. We'll go back to that time. And I think we might lean back into that way, but I don't think it's going to fall. We're too big. We're too big to fall back into that.
Too big to fail.
Yeah. All right. So should we talk a little bit about the protests and the riots? I want to say one quick thing, and you can go ahead after if you want. I want to be sure, and I've talked about it before, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people see this, but I always like to touch up on it because on Facebook I see people not differentiating the protesters from the rioters. I think it's real important to notice for sure that there is a difference. And like Sarah was saying, there's some troublemakers or just people kind of just stirring things up and have different agendas and making it look like it's a whole huge group when indeed most of it's peaceful from what I've seen. I don't get all the angles, but I'm glad we're doing it. And like you said, Sarah, things don't change by just asking nicely generally. You can see with the Civil War and the Revolutionary War and all the wars, really, all the times that we broke free from oppressive energy, it took a strong backbone and quite often taking up arms. I'm not a fighter. I'm a lover. But I'll tell you what, I'm Scottish too, and no one's going to take what's mine, my land. We're going to fight for it. We'll fight for the quality of it. We'll fight in that time when I was Scottish in many parallel lives. I was fighting the English for my small little sanctuary. And so we're not necessarily fighting this time, which is good. That's an involvement, in my opinion. But we are fighting in emotion and energies and just karma. This just like Sybil says, this is a time of karmic action. We're learning and breaking karmic lessons, which is no, a very small percentage, even handful of people can't and don't have enough ego energy to control us all. When they get to that point of hierarchy, for whatever reasons, their ego gets off the chain, and then they keep getting more and more greedy. It's like a sickness. And I think that we are overturning that. I'm a bit optimistic, and I know it'll take time, but just bringing it on its tail, turning it on its head, I can appreciate. How are you feeling about it all?
Oh, well, I have lots of feelings about it. I think you're right. I think the peaceful protests are obviously much more in quantity. The vast majority are peaceful, and the vast majority of people, even if they're angry and yelling in the streets and, really fired up, that's so peaceful. It's not, it's not a violent riot unless people are being harmed, property is being, damaged and destroyed, right? And so I think we should, definitely know if you drive by protesters that are screaming and, tears running down their face or super angry, like that's so peaceful. Like,
yes,
I know it doesn't really it doesn't feel peaceful to you, and nor should it. It should be, distressing. It should represent that. You should get that, that emotion. I also feel like we have a really whitewashed memory about how civil rights came about to begin with. And I went to public school in an all-white school, literally all-white school. I graduated with 48 people, so it wasn't all that big. But, yeah, exactly. But, my understanding, and my daughter's 7, and granted, she's still young to be learning probably the full amount of, the context of the civil rights, but it's obviously been amplified for her now for us to talk about it. And she's like, I thought that didn't happen any longer. And to her credit, I thought that didn't happen any longer either when I was up in upstate New York in an all-white school, and they never taught us, about civil rights and the fact that racism is still a thing. But everyone's listening and learning now. I've watched the movie Selma the other day, which if you haven't seen it, it's so good. And I just about died because the parallels as to what was going on then and what is going on now, 80 years later, are fucking spot on. The police were instigating peaceful protesters, trying to scare them from, even being willing to protest or march. And they were punishing, white protesters as much as the black protesters because they didn't want to be, show favorites or, show them hey, you want to protect the black community, then you get the same treatment they get. And that's not how people like to talk about Martin Luther King. He was leading these marches. He was leading these protests. And they don't like to talk about him in a way that isn't completely he was so peaceful and everything happened without any violence. And that's how it should be going down this time. It's well, you don't remember then actually how many people died in those protests. And the fact that he himself lost his life as a result. That's not peaceful. It's not peaceful at all. And so I just, I want people to remember that, civil rights didn't happen because people asked nicely. People lost their lives. There was a ton of violence. And our response the first time around was to make minor concessions to calm the public, to make them feel like they had gotten what they wanted. And then on the back end, through policy and systemic issues, systemic patterns, taking it all back. And so they're basically, essentially, in a lot of ways, exactly where they were during the civil rights era. And granted, not in all ways, but we certainly haven't brought them to a place where they can be equals from, even if you want to talk about, financial, situations, the challenges that they have even getting home loans compared to those from, white neighborhoods or white communities. It's big and it's time. And I'm not really too concerned if we burn it all down at this point.
I'm not too concerned about it either. And I see a lot of people from my home state. I live in a small town too. I come from a very small town in Michigan. We graduated with, I think it was 68, so we're a touch bigger than you. Just a couple people bigger,
right.
But very small nonetheless, and predominantly white. I think we had a mulatto child in our school, and there may have been one black family and maybe one Hispanic family. So basically white. But I've been seeing some really untasteful things from some of my, I'll call them small-minded, to be kind, friends. And I always like to keep the temperature. I don't defriend people because they have different ideas and feelings that I do. I like to see how all types of people are feeling. And I do that for a spiritual practice so I can learn detachment and not to trigger. But it's hard not to trigger when you have white people throwing into the protester faces about how Martin Luther King Jr. was peaceful. They're like, well, mind you, 90% of these are the people who didn't like Colin kneeling either, okay?
Right.
So maybe they just have a problem with black people and don't like to admit it or whatever. Point being, they're saying, this MLK, he was peaceful. That's how it's done. I go, do you realize he had a peaceful mentality, but those people got beat? I mean, haven't you seen any of those civil rights movies? White people getting beat, black people getting beat, everyone getting beat by cops. Their brutality is out of hand. 20% of our cops are from the military. The military teaches you to kill. It's kind of the job there. And I posted something on Facebook saying, San Francisco is now going to consider not hiring cops that have records. And I think it was violent records too. I'll have to get the word that they used, but they were like, oh no, I think we'll stop hiring people that have records for anger issues. And I'm like, now that this is a disgrace. It's a disgrace that I wasn't looking into this, and it's a disgrace that none of us were looking into it, and that we didn't know that was a thing. Yeah, we didn't know that was a thing. I mean, you think public service, you're going to find someone with a clean record, someone who's ready for public service. No, indeed. Probably a lot of domestic violence and what have you. And I'm not blanket statementing this. I know there's a lot of good cops out there, but the system needs to be looked at and managed. But a lot of people are saying, Martin Luther King, he was peaceful. You should also be peaceful, projecting your ego onto how people should respond, right? Which is just egoic across the board. And I have to pipe in and say, they murdered him, right? Even though he was peaceful, he got shot in the head because he was a wonderful, wonderful revolutionary leader, just like Malcolm X, and they were killed because they had a movement going. And this was just 68 years, or 1968. So my hashtag the other day on Facebook, and one of my posts, I took a picture of a dirty martini, and I was like, 1968 redo. I need to have a drink. This is ridiculous, the parallels that are so similar. But a problem doesn't just go away until you look at it. If you have a problem with drinking and you don't address it, it's an ism. It generally gets worse. It generally doesn't heal itself. It might go away for a minute and the issues might not present themselves for a moment, but that doesn't mean it's gone. And now we have this uprising again, and you'll see the world standing with us. The world is standing with the Black voice right now, and it brings me to tears. I mean, the incredible support. The other day at the breakfast table, I said to my boyfriend, it was about a week ago, I said, I wonder if Europe's proud of us. They take to the streets. They don't like something, they're out there hitting the pavement. And then, before you know it, the next day I'm looking out and I'm seeing Berlin has joined in, and then major city after major city joining in on this protest. It's beautiful.
It is. And I think if you were to boil down kind of the counter movement there, it boils down into comfortability. And if I'm to look at my own kind of circle of friends and family who are like, absolutely, the cops, what they're doing is wrong, but as soon as they say but, it becomes a comfortability thing, wherein they're more comfortable. They would be more comfortable if people responded a certain way. They would be more comfortable if people stopped looking at them as being racist just because they're white. They would be more comfortable if, and it's like, that isn't how this all works. You can be unhappy with the fact that you're uncomfortable. You can be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, but that's how you feel. That's on you, and you can either get right with it or you can fight about it. But ultimately, the world is changing, and that's just how it is. I know in the past they've been able to maintain their like the last time the civil rights movement happened, like white people were able to remain comfortable. Even when the Nazis, and the Holocaust were going on, the vast majority of the middle income, upper income white people remained comfortable. They went on their fucking lives. People were being, shoved into gas chambers and, you could smell the, dead bodies burning, and people just kind of went on with their thing. They had jobs. They sent their kids to school. They kept doing their fucking thing because being comfortable is the top priority for humans for whatever reason. And right now, in this period of time, people are already kind of uncomfortable, and they're like, you know what? We didn't die. We're a little uncomfortable having to stay home from COVID all the time, but I'm still alive. You know what I mean? Like, we're just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and it's no longer an excuse to, like, do atrocious things just because it maintains your own comfortability. People are now willing to make themselves uncomfortable, and that's what makes the difference, I think, in this case over what's happened previously.
Yes, and the longer it takes for people to start to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, so to speak, or used to it, it'll take, the pressure will build. So what's happening is that, like, for example, during the Holocaust, when people didn't say or do something, that situation didn't get better. It got way out of hand, and they probably on some level had some guilt around not doing something after everything was said and done and they knew about what was going on. But this is what's happening here, where people who aren't paying attention, I like to call them the treadmill people or the hamster wheel people, who are just so stuck in their routines that their lives aren't being affected by this. And that's okay, and that's good, and I'm glad for them. But what they also have to understand is at some point it's going to come a little too close to home. I don't pray that on people. I wish that they didn't have struggles, but because it's not touching you now doesn't mean it's not going to touch you in the future. And that brings me to my next question, Sarah. As a mother, you're a mother, I would like to ask you a question, because I know you're very woke, let's call it, but a lot of people that are raising children don't have that edge to them, or maybe don't have access to that knowledge, or are too busy with their existence or whatever. But that thing I was talking about, where if they're not going to see it now, it's definitely going to come up in the future. This is what comes to mind, and I want to ask you if you've thought about this, or if you think this is even a thing. Do you think that this shift is going to change dramatically how humans do things? And I'll give you an example. Very classically, people get married in their mid-20s, something like that. I don't know. They get married whenever they get married, but let's just use some basic terms here. They get married in their mid-20s, and they buy a house maybe in their mid-30s or whatever that is, whenever they can afford it, or maybe sooner, and then they have children or what have you. Do you feel like our economy is going to be so crinkled that kind of basic lineup for life is going to be messed with? I know the millennials are having less kids because of money situations. Do you think that's going to continue?
Oh, for sure. We're already seeing that. I think people are having to live with their parents much longer. Education continues to increase in cost, so less people are choosing either to go get an education, or if they do get an education, they're then in debt for forever and ever, which means it's harder for them to buy houses. It's harder, but also on a more maybe mentality, spirituality, the generations that are coming up now, like, they don't have the same consumerist drives that our parents did and our grandparents did. So you're seeing people in the tiny house movement. You're seeing books like Marie Kondo's the minimalism movement. Exactly. And, they just aren't incentivized, even in the workplace. They aren't incentivized by the same things, the retirement plans, good or bad or whatever. Like, they aren't incentivized by the same things. And so we're going to continue to see that. But, I mean, more so, I feel like, and this is more on the woo side of things, the spiritual side of things, like, I talk about my children a lot. And my oldest, who's 7, we were having a conversation at the dinner table the other day, and John was watching something about the riots, and so she asked about it, and we started talking about prejudice and racism and kind of what that looks like, and she kind of walked through, and she's like, okay, so let's say a teacher wanted to get a job, but the principal interviewed them and said, sorry, we're looking for a white teacher. And then my daddy, who's a lawyer, would come in and say, this teacher's a good teacher. You need to give him a chance. And I was like, well, that's advocacy, and that's a good thing. I said, but sometimes it's not so blatant. Sometimes it looks like you're not experienced enough, or you're too experienced, or you don't have the right experience. And she's like, okay, so this teacher comes in. The principal says they don't have enough experience. So then my daddy comes in and says, come with me. We're going to get you that experience. And it was just the whole thing blew my mind because she was like so solutions oriented. Like this was the first time we'd even talked about something like this. And she was all about, okay, like, let's just fix this. Like, let's just, and so, you know, for me, that generation, the generation, I've mentioned this a couple of times to people since it's happened, in that we are going to burn it down. Our generation is going to burn it down. We are going to probably rebuild it. It's going to look a little bit different. It's going to feel a lot different. Their generation, they are going to protect it. They are the ones that in them embody the equality, the love, the understanding. They have this soul recognition of how things should be, and they are the warriors, in my opinion, that, and they'll do it in different ways. My 7-year-old, she is going to love the shit out of you. She is going to love people to the point where, like, equality is the only option. My youngest, she will be out there in armor. Like, okay, love doesn't work. That's okay. There are other options. Like, I will cut you down from the ankles. Like, she is a beast, and she loves real hard, but she also has no fear. And, like, she is not afraid to disappoint you as long as her morals and her kind of moral compass remains untarnished. And that just, to me, is just gorgeous. It's just gorgeous to watch these kids, like, grow up with these systems that they don't recognize as their own. And so they don't feel the need to embody them. They'll just change them.
We need them. I'm so glad for this. I think they call them Gen Z, and I'm sure maybe your youngest daughter, or maybe both of them might be the one after that. I don't even know what that's called, but I love that they're going to protect what we plowed down. You had a lot of activists before us. You saw that big revolution in the 60s and the 20s, so on and so forth. Keep going back. There's revolution after revolution, and we are making huge strides, and it will be real important to have some soldiers and some light warriors coming up behind us to hold it in place and not let it fall back into its dysfunction or what have you. So
exactly.
It makes me so happy when you talk about your kids, and I hear people talking about their kids. I'm like, when you guys talk about them, I know they're coming in with old soul energy, but be advocates, and as well as healing, as well as that warrior energy, advocates for animals, the planet, people. We need this. This is that generational change that we've been hoping for, and it's been a long time coming, and I think we're at a breaking point, and it's very exciting. Sarah, it always goes too fast. I'm going to use the last minute here to tell everybody we are Downward Dogma. We're here every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find all of our archived links on any major podcast app. You just search Heart Over Ego Radio, and go ahead and search Third Eye Political Radio. Both sister stations, one dealing with the spiritual, Heart Over Ego, and one dealing with the political, Third Eye Political Radio. Sarah, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you. And until next time, I'm going to run our commercial. Everyone have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
You are listening to Heart Over Ego Radio, a network of shows offering healing and guidance for your beautiful journey. Tune in on Mondays for the Alchemy Sisters, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 Eastern. Tuesdays, tune in and tune up. Body awareness and self-care, 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Wednesdays, One for All is Love, 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Thursdays, Unbound with Cynthia Martin, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern. Fridays, The Witching Hour with Green Witch Village and the Alchemy Sisters, 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And on Fridays, Rain Radio, 10 Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Saturdays, Creating Heaven on Earth, 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And Sundays, Everyday Psychic Radio at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. This is the Third Eye Political Radio Network.